Good morning. How are you this morning? It's such a pleasure to be back with you this morning. You saw that the video's name was Mixing Too Much, and we're going to talk a little bit about um, the foods that we eat, and we're going to probably be doing a series on different details about food. And I think the first thing that we're going to be talking about is variety, and we'll get into why in just a second. Before we get started, however, whenever we're making a change, we uh, we need to remember that it might not be very easy for us, and we need the power that God can give us to have strength and ability to obey and to do and to make changes. Promise after promise is giving, assuring us of the fullness of the power that God has, and yet we are so weak in faith that we do not grasp the power. Oh, how much we need a living, earnest faith in the truths of God's Word. This great need of God's people is constantly before me. What can we do to arouse them to see that we are living in the very evening of this earth's history? We need to seek for a faith that will lay hold on the arm of Jehovah. So, as we are talking about this, please remember that we have the privilege of getting strength from outside of ourselves to fulfill what we feel God is asking us to do, even in our diets, even in what we do every single day. Um, when we talk about food, and there's a lot of information out there on both sides of the equation. Um, some people say that you need to eat as much variety as you possibly can, and so that means you can have hundreds of different things all at once. Some people say that that variety should be during the day, some during the week, some during, you know, all kinds of different ideas out there. Um, I, however, would like to share with you what is has been shared with us for a couple of almost 200 years now, which is a specific kind of food combination that is extremely important. When we have a meal, our body needs to receive certain amount of nutrients during the day. And it's really important that we have a variety of different foods. In other words, from one day to the next, I should not be eating the same thing all the time. Same kind of grains, same kind of beans, same kind of nuts, same kind of seeds. I mean, there's lots of different varieties, and it's not necessarily good for me to have all of those varieties together at once, but at the same time, it's also not good for me to be eating the same thing every single day. It's one of the reasons why you saw I posted a recipe, well, kind of a recipe explaining about these pancakes that I made that were not made from wheat. If you think about it, a lot of us eat the same thing or versions of the same thing all the time. We have bread. Bread is made from wheat. Instead of diversifying and having it made from something else, we get stuck in what I call a rut. Well, there are certain kinds of food combinations that are actually extremely detrimental to health. And one of those I'd like to talk about today. And that is actually a combination of ingredients and not a specific food. I'm not going to say mashed potatoes, for example. um, it's the ingredients that we put into our recipes. We mix them together so that it becomes a finished product that we like. For example, bread. Bread is made out of a number of different things: water, some kind of flour, some kind of leavening, and normally a little bit of salt and a little bit of sugar. So that's about 5 different ingredients, okay? And that's when, oil is not added to that, so it's possibly even 6. So if you look at a loaf of bread that you purchase, you'll notice that that loaf of bread has more than 6 ingredients. They put other things like preservatives and chemicals and something to help the bread to be softer and all kinds of stuff in there. So most of the time you will see that there's many more than 6 ingredients in your bread. But the combination that I'd like to talk about this morning is not, what's in the bread. It's not what's in uh, the common everyday foods that we eat. I'd like to talk to you about the 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 combinations that sometimes we see in a diet where you have a food that has milk. Now, when I say milk, and I'm talking about it in a negative term, we're talking about cow's milk, okay? So if you have an animal-based milk that has been mixed with sugar, it's a problem, okay? And there are some situations where that milk and sugar have been mixed with fats, or that milk and sugar have been mixed with egg, that milk and sugar has been mixed with something else. But um, the specific combination that I'm talking about today is just the milk and the sugar. Now, when you think of milk and sugar, what comes to your mind? What food would you think of when someone is eating milk and sugar? Well, we have something called milkshakes, milk and sugar. We have ice cream, that's milk and cream and sugar. um, we have puddings and sauces. Um, Gravies, I wouldn't say because there's no sugar there. So that doesn't, it's not the same situation as it is here. So let me read to you something that talks to us about the combination of milk and sugar. Now, about milk and sugar, I know that people are becoming afraid with the health reform, and they say that it has nothing to do with them because we talk about things that they use a lot of. Changes need to be made with great care, and we should be very cautious and wise about these changes. Absolutely. We should follow good counsel, and we recommend that all men and women who are intelligent use the same care. Great quantities of milk and sugar eaten together are very bad. They communicate to the organism or the body impurity. Sugar i- is sugar is a real problem. And the more we read about the milk and sugar, what happens is this combination causes fermentation. Okay, and the fermentation, then the first thing that it does, believe it or not, is it stops my frontal lobe from working. And so we need to be careful of anything that has milk and sugar in it. And you say, well, that's old information. Well, actually, recently I say within the last 10 years, they have found that people, children, young people especially, that are eating a high amount of fat and sugar in their diet have a tendency to have imbalanced hormones. They go into puberty faster than they should. Um, and they wind up having all kinds of other issues going on with that. I would like to suggest that we think about these things, because if you think about it, every kind of food that contains milk and sugar in the same thing, we know that they're not really good for us. We already know that. We don't have to hear somebody saying, "Oh, you shouldn't eat that." Because, I mean, that's something that I know is going to make me gain weight. I know that's something that's going to raise my blood pressure, my blood sugar, and, so I shouldn't really have to say anything about that. But because of the taste, because our palate is used to being in that situation, of taste, we have a tendency to eat it a lot. So this writer says like this: I have frequently sat at the table of brothers and sisters and seen them using a great quantity of milk and sugar. It irritates the digestive organs and affects the brain. So there's some issues there. It says, believe it or not, that it's this combination is worse for the brain and the body than is the use of meat. And I know I haven't talked much about meat yet, but um, we are going to need to think very hard and very long about, why am I eating what I'm eating? And that's a really good rule. If I'm going to sit down and eat something and I know that it's bad for me, that's not temperance. That's not going to lead to me being healthier. It's quite the opposite. So I'd like to encourage us to think about it. If I know deep down in my heart that something is bad for me, I should be avoiding it. So help I hope that just helps you to think a little bit more about these situations, and help us also to make a decision for the right, avoiding things that we know are bad for us. Have a great day. Stephen Timothy. First thing,